Hey, everybody.
I am. Hi, everybody. Hi. Hi.
I see you now. Now you're live. There you go. I can watch you and I can watch me. Two separate live streams. It's the FiveStack times
Everybody.
two.
Hi, everyone. It's been a go.
Yeah.
And forgive me for the audio today. I'm not talking into my microphone because my phone was dying because I've been on podcasts all day. So you and I do a podcast, cover the Carney Trump disaster for Trump, and then hop off. You go do another podcast. I went and did another podcast. I grabbed a pepperoni stick and some water, and boom, here I am. I didn't think that the Trump Carney thing would make this much noise, but it apparently did, Zeb. Apparently,
It was a big deal. Not only was it a big deal, you are a big deal in all of this because you are explaining to everybody in the zeitgeist exactly how to take today's big showdown between Donald Trump and Mark Carney. Because you really have predicted a lot of the moves and the subtleties of what will be going into this meeting today. And it was a really interesting, long meeting. And we'll go into it in quite detail today because it is our story number 5. But why don't you tell us as an opening thing, and we'll play some clips as well because we can now. But tell me about what your thoughts were about this extraordinary, to me, two men who are very different people, two guys that could not be any more different from each other. And yet here they were facing off, and the big bully didn't win. The big bully, the louder guy, lost.
you just sat there and looked like an idiot for an hour. Listen, if it depends on what you expected out of today. And what I expected out of today, which we talked about a couple of days ago when we were projecting what to expect, was a very demure Donald Trump, a very complimentary Donald Trump, because he really needed this to go well. He's 20 points underwater. His economy is dying. There will be empty shelves soon in a consumer mad country where everybody owns guns. The midterms are coming up in about a year and a half, and they're always campaigning. So, he's got a record of extreme failure. China's not doing business with him. No one's calling him. So he gets Mark Carney to show up because he begged Mark Carney to show up, and Mark Carney went.
Yeah.
And he said, "Hey, I'd like to talk to you and welcome you to the White House and talk about your stunning victory." And Mark Carney's, "Okay, we're going to be respectful though." And he goes, "Oh, of course we are." And what happened today was the capitulation of the American president to Canada's new prime minister, Mark Carney. What happened today was a sideshow of dementia with a touch of capitulation. When Trump was asked, "What kind of concessions are you looking for from Canada?" And he goes, "Concession?" And the reporter's, "Yeah, concession." And he looked at the camera and he goes, "Friendship."
Yes, which is not something
I
Donald
wanna
Trump has
be
ever said
friends.
to anybody, ever, that he wants to be friends with somebody. And it's the last thing he's ever needed from anybody. But he now, after declaring Canada like an enemy state, basically, saying he was going to attack Canada, he was going to annex Canada as the 51st state.
Forcibly take it over.
Yeah, having made every single Canadian absolutely mad at him, he now suggests that he wants to be friends with Canada and doesn't want any other concessions. That is the concession he wants, by the way. Like it was very funny. And the reporter telling him that isn't a concession was hilarious because, he doesn't even know that.
Keep in mind, it was a complete capitulation to Mark Carney. He was so fucking intimidated by Carney. The rest of his carnival barking cabinet members sat there stunned. They didn't say a word. There was no back and forth. There were no insults unless they came from Mark Carney, who, word master. You've really changed things on the world stage. Great job, dude. And Trump saying, "Thanks a lot."
Should we watch that? Should we watch this clip? Let's watch this clip.
This was the intro. This is Mark Carney. And I want people to listen very carefully to how he chose his words to make it sound like a compliment, but indeed, none of this was meant to be complimentary. Have a listen to Mark Carney.
Well, that the president has vitalized international security, revitalized NATO, and us playing our full weight in NATO in that part.
They have, I must say, Canada is stepping up the military participation because Mark knew they were low and now they're stepping it up. And that's a very important thing.
And then I think it dawned on him halfway through that that's what was happening.
Yeah, there was a noticeable shift after that where Donald Trump then started to talk about the 51st state stuff, et cetera, et cetera. But the intro was almost sense bad where he was like, "Yeah, I just need to thank you. We're interested in transforming Canada. You're the most transformative president in U.S. history." And keep in mind, what he's referring to is the rest of the world having to transform into their own superpowers, transforming different trade and security agreements because everybody's moving away from Donald Trump. So as I'm watching this, I'm like, oh my God, he's giving it to him with a smile on his face. And Trump's really, wow, thank you very much. That's how out of touch he is. The other part of that I thought was really funny was when he really got down to Donald Trump's grade 6 level. And he goes, the question was about the 51st state rhetoric. And Donald Trump was like, I still believe Canada would be a 51st state. I think it'd be beautiful. It'd be cherished people. Imaginary borders could go away. Real estate, we'd have a great time. But then he said, it takes two to tango. So completely softened his stance on the whole, yeah, we're going to take it forcibly. But it takes two to tango now. And that's when Mark Carney piped up. And he's, listen, Canada is its own sovereign country. We're never going to be the 51st state, never. And then Trump's never say never. And Mark Carney went like this. Next.
Did he really say that?
Yeah. Really, the end of the clip. He's like, never.
Oh, I never saw that part. I think
my God.
This is a part of the clip, but we can watch it a little bit. Let's look at the interaction here.
Yeah, okay.
No, not at all. Not at all. No, time will tell. It's only time. But I say never. I've had many things that were not doable, and they ended up being doable, and only doable in a very friendly way. But if it's to everybody's benefit, Canada loves us, and we love Canada. That's, I think, the number one.
Yeah, it's at the start.
But nevertheless, you know,
yeah. But listen, that was like a moment. And Mark Carney's face a couple of times where he's rolling his eyes, going, interesting. We don't do business with you. That was another thing he said. But my original point when he would the never say never conversation is at one point, Donald Trump was trying to understand what Mark Carney was saying when he said, we're never going to become the 51st state. And how he put it in in a term or phrase that Donald Trump could truly understand, like a sixth grader. He's like, Mr. Trump, President Trump, you know that some real estate just isn't for sale, right? You live in the White House, right? The White House is not for sale. He goes, oh, no, White House is not for sale. He goes, I just spoke with the owners of Canada, and they've assured me that Canada is also not for sale. And the look on Trump's face was like, wait a second, there's a person that owns Canada? Is it a family? I've looked at this moment, I'll isolate it and put it in the blog post, where Donald Trump was like, really excited that he could finally fucking understand somebody in the room. Like, he's speaking a language I understand. You're right. And he agreed with him. Like, Mark Carney got Donald Trump to agree that some things are just not for sale, like the house you live in or Buckingham Palace. You've been there, Donald. He goes, I sure have, buddy. And he's like, hey, and I also spoke to the owners of Canada, and they've assured me Canada's not for sale. And you saw, I was talking to Lev Parnas about it earlier. You saw his shift right there a little bit, but you also saw him confused, thinking that, wait a second, someone owns the deed to Canada? Is that?
Well, I just think because the two things there, the king does actually have a say in all of this, because it is the king who signed the treaty, who's the hereditary owner of the treaty of who gets Canada. So the king would have to, and that's why I think he inserted the Buckingham Palace comment there, because it would be actually up to King Charles to agree to any handover of power. But the other piece of it, when he spoke about the people that he'd spoken to in Canada, was he was referring to the voters, so that he'd been all the way through across the country, had spoken to every single riding practically, I think, in the time that he was across the country during the campaign. And they elected him.
Yeah, that's how I took it, too. Yeah. And that's how the world took it.
Yeah.
It's not him.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I still believe that. It takes two to tango, right? But no, I do. I believe it would be a massive tax cut for the Canadian citizens.
Why?
You get free military, tremendous medical cares and other things.
Medical care, free health care is in Canada, not the other way around.
It would be a massive tax cut. And it's also a beautiful, as a real estate developer, I'm a real estate developer at heart. When you get rid of that artificially drawn line, somebody drew that line many years ago with a ruler, just a straight line right across the top of the country. When you look at that beautiful, I'm a very artistic person, but when I looked at that beauty, I said, that's the way it was meant to be. I do feel it's much better for Canada, but we're not going to be discussing that unless somebody wants to discuss it. I think that there are tremendous benefits to the Canadian citizens, lower taxes, free military, which honestly we give you essentially anyway, because we're protecting Canada if you ever had a problem. But I think it would really be a wonderful marriage, because it's two places that get along very well. They like each other a lot.
If I may, as from real estate, there are some places that are never for sale.
That's true.
We're sitting in one right now, Buckingham Palace, that you visited as well.
That's true.
And having met with the owners of Canada over the course of the campaign the last several months, it's not for sale, won't be for sale. ever. But the opportunity is in the partnership and what we can build together. Have done that in the past is with respect to our own security.
So that was the moment.
Yeah.
Wow, what
So
a great
right
message.
after that, that's when Donald Trump, because he leaned into the idea that thanks to Donald Trump, we're going to build our own military. Trump's, you're welcome. It's totally missed it. And then he goes, but we'll never become the 51st state. And then Trump goes, never say never, right? And then he points to him and he goes to answer another question. And Carney looks out at the sea of reporters and he goes like this, never. It was absolutely brilliant.
This is, by the way, Carney's face, and that's the foreign minister, Jolie, behind him on the way out. And that is a very satisfied look on both of their faces, I think. I think
They crushed it.
They know they crushed it. They know they won that meeting. And Mark Carney looks, I've not seen a Canadian prime minister with this much dogged determination and confidence behind him. This is really impressive for, and this is his first outing on the world stage. Let's be clear about that in this capacity. And he's going up against Donald Trump and winning. This is really a win for Canada.
And buddy, he didn't have to do much. Like if you took all the words that were spoken and you attributed them to Donald Trump, his side of the ledger is thick. Mark Carney's just a few bullet points, but he was so surgical with how and so direct and so funny and killed them with kindness. But also the kindness wasn't really kindness. There were these backhanded comments.
Whole backhanded compliments.
All of them. Now, apparently after that meeting, Trump wasn't happy, I found out, because he thought that Mark Carney was too forceful, pushing back against the 51st state stuff. And then, of course, they had lunch. Not sure what happened in the lunch, but they did have a press conference. And I just watched a couple of minutes of it. Mark Carney just reiterated his stance over and over again. And he said he did ask Donald Trump to stop with the 51st state rhetoric, to which Trump implied he would. So that's why you've seen a softening of his stance. He also said, I don't control what Donald Trump says. So I'm just going to go about the business of managing this country that I'm the prime minister of. Mr. Trump is entitled basically to say whatever he wants. It doesn't change the job that I'm here to do. I think that's going to be one of those moments in history where a bunch of lights turn on for Canadians, where it's like, we don't have to be so jacked up all the time over this dickhead in the rhetoric, because what we watched there was the taming of Donald Trump on the world stage, the capitulation of Donald Trump to Canada, and the ass kissing of Mark Carney via the entire Trump regime, including Trump himself. And he just had to hang on at the end of it and say, yeah, I still think there's subsidies. Anyway, have a nice day, everybody. Like it was masterpiece. It was an absolute masterpiece, and will go down as one of the greatest diplomatic moments in Canada's history.
A couple of things that are really interesting to me. JD Vance was not there today, even though he was expected to be there. He never came to today's meeting. And I wonder whether he was asked not to come, maybe by the Canadians, or whether they just didn't, having seen the performance with Zelensky, maybe they asked him to not attend. Quite plausible. That's one of the things that I thought was interesting. But the other interesting thing is that Carney isn't there saying, hey, we can do this, we can beat Trump at all these tariffs, but he's actually got the proof. The American tariffs against Canada have resulted in a 6.6% reduction in imports or exports from Canada into the United States. That has been offset by exports to every other country. So there's been an increase by 24% in exports to other countries. So there has been not a single dollar lost in terms of Canada's trade deficit with the rest of the world and with the United States at all. What you basically have here is America hurting itself, not getting its products, not getting its traditional market that it's used to, hurting the American consumer a lot. And the Canadians are not being hurt by this. They're just selling their products to other parts of the world. So who's losing out here?
I think that's pretty simple. America's 2 weeks away from empty shelves. Every port in the United States is not offloading anything at the moment. And to your point, there have been some pain points for Canadians. I think Windsor lost a couple of shifts at their manufacturing plant for some vehicles. Stellantis. So there've been some individual issues, but that's obviously something that comes out of the United States too. 60% of the vehicles that we make go into the United States, and people are not buying cars right now because of austerity measures, right? Because they're in a recession. They're literally in one. That's a global issue, but it is all covered by Trump, to your point. And that's why Mark Carney deserves all the credit, not just for his performance today, but the strategy that went into walking in there, a confident individual, knowing he could replace that business. We have, for the first time in our history, exported more oil to China than America. That was in the month of April. There's lots left to be seen. I think Canada's stronger with a secure agreement with the United States when it comes to trade. It's easier. The path is there. We've been doing it for hundreds of years. but Canada does not trust Donald Trump, and that relationship will not return in any of the same ways it existed before, especially when it comes to trade and tariffs and security. Because again, Canada has moved on. That's why Mark Carney went in there a confident guy today. He knew he had done the work and will continue to do the work to diversify our trade partners, selling our energy, selling our oil, rare earth, raw materials, energy corridor built across the top of the country. And he's happy. He's happy with that. And you can't bully someone with a plan. And if there's anybody that doesn't have a plan that was in that meeting, it was Donald Trump, which was painfully evident by how many things he promised Americans with little or no proof. Someone was like, hey, is there an agreement? And he goes, no, just wait. And then he said, there's going to be a big announcement coming up, mystery announcement. You have no idea what it's going to be, so great for the country. And he deals with China. No, but I just set the deal. Like everything was this projection of things that are coming and the refusal to deal with what is here, which is literally the slow death, which is speeding up a lot faster, of the United States economy and reputation on the world stage.
Also, and of this administration. I think you can say this about the slow death of the United States, but really it's about the collapse of the Trump administration. We have seen policy after policy collapsing on its head here. And now this one, which is probably the most important to everybody because it ultimately hurts their own pocketbooks and hurts the economy. But when we see this disastrous implementation of the tariff policy where he's charging our own friends, these ridiculous tariffs, and then allowing our adversaries like Russia to get away without any tariffs. He's got this kind of completely twisted view of the world right now. And we are seeing it collapse on its own weight because he just has no capacity to really to win on any of these levels. So what we saw today was a capitulation to Canada, but also a capitulation to the world. He's basically saying, I give up. I no longer have the fight in me. I'm no longer looking strong like I used to. Project all the strength to you. I have nothing. I'm here. I'm an empty can of whatever. I'm the emperor without any clothes.
Yeah, dude. And his posture during that told the whole story. His body language today was awful. Mark Carney mirrored his body language, stood up straight the entire time, was erect, if you will. I hate to use that word, but his posture.
Funny,
yeah, and very funny. And Donald Trump would just slouched, got a little lower as the thing went on, would put his head down, nod in agreement. He literally looked exhausted today. And listen, I think he was nervous. Like I watched him open that whole thing up with this, you're the best, Mark Carney. I helped you win. But you're so great. Your debate was great. You're great. Your country's great. That's a guy who's he's losing that ability to fight and wasn't looking for a fight today. Wasn't looking for a fight because he couldn't afford to have one.
He didn't have any cards, to use his own expression. He had no cards because Carney had won all those. So
all of them.
Yeah, it's really an interesting turn of events, and it couldn't happen at a sooner time. This is the old setup that we used to use. It's all like new to me again because I haven't used it for so long. And yeah, I'm sure there's a way to do all this stuff, but there's too many screens and things. Where we've been using just the phone lately. And I love just using the phone because it's so simple.
It's made my computer obsolete. It's been great.
I don't need this whole setup over here as much as I love being able to play video clips and all of that. We should get into the number 4 story of the day. And cool, because we've never been able to do this before. This is what it looks like right now at the Vatican. This is the Vatican preparing for their conclave. This is the live shot from our smoke stream. Like that? Smoke stream?
The Vatican smoke stream. You should just leave that up on your social media all day long.
I think I will be doing that. And this is, we know what's going on. It's all starting now. There are going to be various secret votes and debates and horse trading going on inside the Sistine Chapel. But then there will also be occasional moments where that chimney will be blowing smoke. And depending on the color of the smoke, as everybody knows, it'll determine whether they've selected a pope or they haven't selected a pope.
Black smoke means
no deal.
White smoke means deal. Listen, I'll be honest. I know there are a lot of Catholics out there. I know there's probably several listening to the show. I respect everybody's belief system. I couldn't care less about who the next pope is going to be. It doesn't matter. That is such an obsolete group of old dudes that just are hanging on tooth and nail to the wealth and the traditions of the Vatican because it gives them purpose and it gives them power and influence. I get it. The power struggle that's going to go on between a politically motivated pope or a pope with a little bit of humanity or maybe an Opus Dei pope. I get it. I get the implications. But watching everybody watch this smoke stream, I think if you're honest to God, and I don't mean this to be pejorative, but if you're spending hours a day watching a screen, waiting to see smoke come out of a chimney in Rome, I'm sorry. I'm just sorry for you. I'm just crazy.
I think what's going on in there is always very significant. I think does ultimately lead to the election of someone who's very important on the world stage. When you look at the end of the Soviet Union, it was the Pope who was involved with Reagan in trying to end the Soviet Union. Even the most recent Pope, Francis, has been a very important vocal critic of Trump, especially around immigration issues. Ultimately, they might seem a little irrelevant to the crazy politics of the day, but they are certainly still the spiritual leader of so many people around the world, and they set the tone for many countries that are still very much Catholic countries. So the process is sacred. It has been going on for a very long time. I'm not Catholic either, but this is the way they've done things for a long time, and they've passed down power from pope to pope successfully doing this process for centuries. A center of power, just as in terms of its wealth, in terms of its influence around the world. You just can't ignore these kind of networks, because when you think about it, you think about Opus Dei, also involved in the Donald Trump thing. They have networks of priests everywhere in the world. They have people everywhere in the world. They connect to everybody in the world, and they can easily influence elections. They can certainly influence policy. They've done so with abortion. They've done so with the return of the sort of draconian anti-woman legislation that keeps coming up. It's foolhardy to say that they're irrelevant, but maybe they're not relevant to everybody. And maybe that's the biggest problem with the church.
Listen, I'm not saying the Catholic Church and the Pope aren't irrelevant. That's the opposite. Yeah. What I'm saying is that I just don't care.
I respect you for that. It all takes place under really interesting circumstances. If you just think about the beauty of the event. You've been to the Sistine Chapel, haven't you?
No, I'm actually going next week.
Oh, when you go there, you won't be able to see this probably because they'll be sequestered off. But the Sistine Chapel is this beautiful fresco done by Michelangelo. You've seen the pictures, obviously. So it all happens under that kind of setting. It's beautiful. You have Swiss guards standing watch all over the place, and that's a whole ritual thing that they do as well. The cardinals are all sequestered during this period of time. They're constantly horse trading with each other, but nobody knows outside of the conclave what is really happening. Total secrecy that happens. And it could go on for weeks.
They don't have access to the outside world at all either, right? But it just from a historical perspective, to your point, the art, the history involved in the process and the ceremony, I think it's cool. But my understanding is that they lock themselves into the Cardinals facility, Cardinals residence, and they go between the Cardinals residence and church and the voting booth in the Sistine Chapel, or that area where all the Cardinals have seats. Yeah. And they keep voting. They keep voting until they get X amount. And I don't know what that amount is of people agreeing that the next Pope is going to be this guy. And I'm unsure what it is, but they go and they go. And there's no access to the outside world. And then it was Benedict, and then it was this guy, Pope Francis. I don't know how long it took, how many votes.
It took a few. He was a long shot.
A few days.
He really wasn't expected to be and no one, I think, in the current running at the top of the list there is going to be the final choice here. It's always a dark horse. What happens in these things is that they get to grandstand a little bit, and there could be a voice that we've never heard of before that suddenly emerges, that makes a speech that really speaks to the Cardinals, and that's what lifts them up. And that's what Francis did when he was elected. It's going to be an interesting few days, and I just love the simplicity of the fact that they communicate this to the world by burning.
Take all the ballots and they put it in this little stove, and then they light the ballots on fire, and depending on white dust, white smoke. I don't know.
In a world where we've been communicating about every little thing over Twitter and on X and every social media platform that we have, everything's so immediate, and we all have access to say, this is just, we send up a smoke signal and the world knows. The world does just know because they've seen it. And I think there's some simplicity to that and a beauty to that is interesting. Our number 3 story of the day, if I can find it here, is so there's
boomer, Jesus.
So there's been several instances lately about the deportation policies of the Trump administration, about this whole idea that they can declare the Aliens Enemies Act applicable to the gang members. So there's this Venezuelan group that was said to be run by the Venezuelan government. They were supposedly a gang. This is the reason that Donald Trump ultimately said that he could deport all these people to El Salvador and all these other places based on the fact that he said that there were an alien invasion, an enemy invasion, and he used the Alien Enemies Act from 1798 to justify his position here. A judge today, for the second time in a week, Judge Hellerstein has blocked the presidential proclamation, ruling that Trump exceeded his authority under the 1798 Aliens Enemies Act. The court dismantles the administration's claim, I should say, of an invasion, noting refugees, gang members don't constitute legal threshold for extraordinary powers that he imposed. So due process, once surrendered, is difficult to reinstate, writes Judge Hellerstein in a blistering 22-page opinion. After rejecting the government's arguments that aliens could be removed based on a brief form, the judge ordered the administration to provide meaningful hearings and proper notice in both English and Spanish. So those people who were deported under this, you remember those SOS picture we showed the other day? Those people are not going to be deported. And any others that need to be picked up, he can't use the Alien Enemies Act. This follows yesterday, the intelligence agencies also saying that they don't believe the Venezuelan government actually controls this gang, which really flies in the face of his own policy. That's his own intelligence agencies. So the big thing that Donald Trump based his entire presidency on, deportation of illegals, that's a collapse too. That's a total fail too. He's not able to do it at all. The judges have stopped him. So either he's going to completely ignore the law, which he might do, but the reality of it is the whole deportation policy was built on a dream, on a fantasy that they could use this old act. It wasn't usable. The judges have all said, the second judge now that said so, and we've had the intelligence community confirm it. It's a pretty another big fail with the number 47.
Oh, man, what a terrible day for Donald Trump. First, he capitulates to Canada on the international stage. Looks like a complete blithering moron doing it, as he's absolutely elevating Mark Carney in Canada to the position of the leaders of the free world. So tough morning. And then this afternoon gets notice that he not only can't use the Alien Enemies Act, but any plan that he has to use it is illegal, and he needs to stop fucking right now. And I'm sure he's going to ignore it because he's looking for a fight so he can change the Constitution. He doesn't give a shit about the Constitution. He hates the judiciary. He hates being told what to do. It's in keeping with Donald Trump's loose interpretation of being able to use any obscure act or any obscure law to reimagine that law so he can do maximum damage to the country that he is the president of. I couldn't be happier for the guy today. And big ups to the American judiciary, because a lot of these judges, and I'll give them credit, a lot of these judges that are ruling against Donald Trump are Trump appointed judges. It takes some scrote to stand there and do what these judges are doing right now, standing up for the American Constitution and the American people and due process and civil liberties and basic human fucking rights. But it's big ups to the intelligence community as well. They all work for him. And he's made it very painfully clear that he's going to root out anybody that goes against him. He's having judges arrested, for Christ's sake. Another terrible day for Donald Trump as it all continues to crash down on him. And he begged Canada for friendship on live television today. And then he gets this order from the judges.
No, it really is. It's one of those days.
What a failure.
What a failure.
You don't need to be so angry all the time about him running roughshod because you enjoy these simple, sweet moments where he gets his ass handed to him by Mark Carney and a couple of judges on the same day. It's a great day.
And it's the extraordinary work of many lawyers and this that are getting us to these points, all this pushback that is happening, because a lot of people out there are doing the work, whether it's as influencers, as lawyers, as activists, are doing the work to get the stuff done. And that's why the pressure continues to mount on Trump. That's why he's failing at almost everything. Story number 2 today, Anne Talnase, I'm not sure I'm saying her name correctly, has been awarded a Pulitzer Prize. Now, she is, by the way, not just a Pulitzer, the highest honor of Pulitzer for fearlessness. She quit the Post. Remember the Washington Post had a flood of people leave a while ago? He quit after they killed a cartoon showing Bezos, the owner of the Washington Post, bowing to Trump. I have the cartoon here. Now, she quit the job. This is the cartoon. You can see it right here. She got the reward. So this is the Pulitzers basically trolling Bezos by giving her this award amid an ongoing exodus. There's still a lot of people leaving the Post every once in a while. We keep hearing the news that the newsroom is being evacuated by people who can't stand the new regime over there. But they still don't have, by the way, a new opinions editor following the departure of David Shipley, and another one that Bezos pushed out. And so you've got a situation there where the cartoonist gets to win at the end of the day, and the Pulitzers get to pull one off over Bezos. Good story. It's Mickey
That's
Mouse.
a great story. It's, again, wonder if there's going to be a moment in time where guys like Bezos or Zuckerberg or Elon Musk, anybody that got into bed with him, anybody that chose to shelf their values for a closer relationship with a rapist and 34-time felon who just can't stop fucking losing. I wonder if at some point they're going to have an awakening, like the Bezoses of the world, where he's going to go, man, I picked the wrong horse for this race.
I think it's too late for them. I don't think there's any awakening that you can do. I don't think there's anyone's going to be listening to these guys and listening to their mea culpas afterwards. This was obvious this was going to happen. You did not have to be a genius to see where this administration was going, having witnessed the first one, to then go and pay homage to him and give him tributes, donate hundreds of millions of dollars to them is complete nonsense. And they did it regardless. They wanted the wins that they thought they were going to get. And they certainly are still trying to get that data capture thing going out of Doge. Maybe that'll help them along the way. But I think we're seeing the world is grinding this down, and Americans are grinding this down. They're not going to let Trump get very far. And it's going to be to the joy.
Neither is Canada.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're not letting that prick off the hook. And we're doing it for Canada in as much as we're doing it for America. And that was the election of Mark Carney, and that was on display today in the Oval Office, my friend.
Yeah, I think you've seen that in the Australian elections. There's a pushback that's going on. And let's not forget that the war in Ukraine is still a disaster for Vladimir Putin. It's not getting any better. They may have had a small victory in Romania, but there's still a lot more winning on the side of democracy than he's losing on the side of authoritarians.
That's because we both have. We've done 3 podcasts. This is my 3rd.
Yeah, it's a long day. The final story, though, is an important story that everyone should pay attention to. So there's a new report that says that, I don't actually have the right one in front of me, but I'll tell you what it is. So the concern here is that Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, has now ordered a 20% reduction in the generals in the highest ranks of the Pentagon. Clearly, this is not just a reduction in the size of a workforce that he says is because of wokeness or DEI. What's really going on here is this military has stood their ground against Hegseth and against Donald Trump, will not give in to any of their ridiculous moves, is embarrassed by the Signal scandal, the Whiskey League scandal, the everything that could go possibly wrong for Defense Secretary scandal, and has gone wrong. And they're tired of it. So instead of resigning, which is what he should be doing, this Secretary of Defense is ordering a 20% reduction in 4-star generals and admirals and a 10% cut to the general and flag officers overall. More generals and admirals does not equal more success, he says. Less generals, more GIs policies. But really, what they want is a compliant military. They want a military that they can use illegally against the people of America if they decide to rise up, if they decide to dissent in any ways. The goal is them to capture the military so they could be used to suppress any uprising. We'll see if they get this, but that's the goal right now.
It's in keeping with the threats to dismantle the FBI, the CIA, USAID. These are excuses to be able to make different institutions compliant, to scare people who are not, to scare the shit out of career servicemen and women who have served their country with such distinction. They've risen to a certain level in the U.S. military. And there are people in the U.S. military, just like there are people in every organization that have different schools of thought or different values, different virtues. A lot of people in the military support Donald Trump. A lot don't. And specifically, the smarter people in the military do not. Those people have all risen to the ranks of general, captain, lieutenant, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what you have now is these repudiations of Trump and Hegseth. And by the way, every single serviceman and men and woman and every person in the Pentagon categorically fucking hates Pete Hegseth, the whistleblower out of doubt. He's like, it's a disaster. Everybody hates the guy. He's just an absolute lunatic. What that was just more noose tightening around institutions that are not compliant with the criminality and the corruption in the Trump regime. So they can go and long shank people out of different positions in different institutions that might push back against the Project 2025 goal, which is to completely deliver servitude to the office of the president of the United States that is occupied by one Donald Trump so that the people around him can have and get what they want. The virtue signaling over this Trump regime's desire to continue to punish people that don't agree with them, to destroy the institutions of the United States of America, specifically the military institution, while promoting it as its best, as the best in the world. I watched Donald Trump today talk about all of his missiles when he was talking to Mark Carney. We got the biggest missiles, we got the biggest this, we got the biggest that. And it was an answer to something completely different. And then you compare that to the demeaning and the inhumanization of, or the dehumanization of the people who are responsible for building the military into what it is. And it's just another attempt to consolidate even more power and to close ranks around the greatest military machine this world has ever seen. And listen, I hope that at some point in time, someone in the Pentagon tunes Pete Hegseth in. And I hope at some point in time, the good men and women who serve the United States military with distinction get out from underneath asshole and his regime who are legitimately and actively trying to destroy it. Canada's building our own military, and we will become a superpower. So it's not like we need the Americans, but it sure was nice for a good 50 years of my lifetime to know that good people were in charge of all that hardware and not complete and total fucking fascist lunatics.
And to their credits, they still are. Yeah. They're still holding the line against Donald Trump, but those people are the reason Donald Trump has not had an easy walk in here. So I think the military is going to be, when we review all of this in a few years from now, everyone's going to be able to say the military was really important in keeping America out of autocracy's hands. And that's because they know exactly what they're about, and they know their values, and they also know that the guy doesn't support them at all. He's busy thinking about getting rid of Veterans Day. He's got a military parade coming up in a few weeks, which is going to be an interesting day because that's exactly the same day there are protests planned in Washington, D.C. So you can imagine the military parade on one side and all sorts of protesters on the other side for the No Kings.
It's a return to the 60s and 70s, bro. Peace, love, dope. I can't wait.
India, yes, has indeed struck Pakistan in what they're saying is about precision strikes, and they're saying that it is a restrained strike. We don't know the full details yet, but that's all we have right now. India says that they've demonstrated considerable restraint in terms of selecting the targets and the method of execution. But there's been all sorts of rumblings along that border for a couple of days now, maybe a couple of weeks, and someone has finally taken action. Let's hope that doesn't inflame. That is the Substack for the FiveStack for today. But it's been a remarkable day for Canada, a remarkable day for the people who believe in the values that are the foundation of America's Constitution, the very things that for 250 years people have been fighting for. That's what won today, I believe, in all these stories that we've had on the show today. We're going to leave you with Carney's press conference above the U.S. Embassy in Washington, D.C. So I'll play all 6 minutes of that on the way out. But Dean, do you have anything else you want to say?
I just have one thing to say. I've been proud of my country for a very long time. I'm an immigrant to this country. Yes, I am an immigrant to Canada. And I grew up with an extreme appreciation and devotion and reverence for this country. Today, I have never been more proud to be Canadian, to have a man represent us who's competent, that has character, that has virtues, that has a couple of really slick degrees in economics, that has great relationships around the world, that stood up for Canada today, no uncertain terms on the world stage, and did it with class and did it with kindness and did it in a really underhanded way. I just want to say, Canada, you knocked it out of the park electing Mark Carney. I am not a liberal. I am not a conservative. And as a matter of fact, the only people I've ever voted for were conservatives prior to this election. That is what Mark Carney is. He could be conservative, he could be liberal, but more importantly, he's Canadian, and he represented Canada on the world stage. He made Donald Trump, the dotard president of the United States, look like an absolute child, surgically, with precision, with calm responses, by sitting there with his body language, with some laughter, with some humor. And he did the free world, not just Canada, proud today. He did a solid. And he gave everybody a roadmap as to how to deal with a guy like Donald Trump in tight spaces. And he's a MAGA killer. Despite what you saw in the handshakes and the cordiality there, that man puts the fear of God into the Trump regime. And that's what you saw today. Elbows up, Canada. Elbows up, world. Let's continue to fight the good fight by doing the right things and standing up for the marginalized, the people who deserve it, and basic human rights. In America, we're still with you. And I think Donald Trump probably has had the worst day in a very long time. So let's all enjoy that together, huh?
President Trump and I met today as leaders of two sovereign independent nations. And I want to thank the president and the members of his cabinet that attended for welcoming me and my colleagues to the White House and for very constructive discussions. We agreed to have further conversations in the coming weeks, and we are looking forward to meeting in person at the G7 summit in Kananaskis in Alberta. The president has made known his wish about that issue for some time. I've been careful always to distinguish between wish and reality. I was clear there in the Oval Office, as I've been clear throughout on behalf of Canadians, that this is never going to happen. Canada is not for sale. It never will be for sale. Some things, as I said in the room, some things are never for sale. And he agreed with that. I distinguish between the two. And then with respect to the importance of reestablishing a constructive relationship for negotiations of a partnership, of an economic and security partnership, which is what we were here for, I look forward, not back. And I think we established a good basis today.
What gives you specifically any indication that the president is willing to renegotiate a new trade deal with you and drop tariffs?
Apart from the fact that he said that he would, he's willing to have that negotiation. I think that's the main thing. That doesn't presuppose the outcome of the negotiation. As I've emphasized, it's a complex negotiation. There'll be zigs and zags, difficult aspects to it. But the prospect is there. We discussed it in more detail. And as I said a moment ago, we'll be following up both between officials, but also he and I in the coming weeks. Thank you.
You told him that Canada was not for sale. Many Canadians are offended and deeply angered by the fact that he keeps repeating this comment. So have you asked the president to stop calling Canada the 51st state?
Yes. Not today.
No. What was his answer?
Well, look, I don't know. He's the president. He's his own person. We're very clear. I've been very clear publicly, consistently. I've been very clear in private. Was clear again in the Oval Office. Would be clear throughout. The president, he understands that we're having a negotiation between sovereign nations and that we will only pursue and accept a deal that's in the best interests of Canada, not just in the short term, but in the medium and long term for Canada. We have been in the process, as most would know, of an election. And so this is the point at which a serious discussion begins. And in any negotiation, then you make a determination based on that. It also, part of what you make a determination based on is, are the incentives aligned in the agreement that you get? And I think the lesson would be of this experience is to ensure that the incentives are aligned and durably between the two countries. And that is a way that agreements are self-reinforcing. Thank you very much.
Prime Minister, do you anticipate lifting tariffs on autos at any point? And what did you tell him in the room about that topic?
We had discussion about all the major issues in the room, so to speak, in the lunch afterwards, including autos, specifically, without going into the full details, the strategic position of the North American auto industry, or more specifically, the Canadian-U.S. auto industry versus foreign competition, including from Asia, and how that could be enhanced. We're having a very complex negotiation about a wide range of issues. And it's, as I said before I came here, I wouldn't have expected white smoke coming out of this meeting. That was not my expectation, that because of the nature of the negotiation. So you don't expect to have specific progress as things move along, even when you're making progress, because it's a global, that's why it's a global negotiation.
Do you feel better or worse about Canada-U.S. relations after meeting with the president today?
Look, it was a very constructive meeting. I feel better about the relations in the sense of, in many respects, one, the posture, if I can put it that way, or the positioning the president took towards us. Secondly, the breadth of discussion and how concrete the discussions were. These are the discussions you have when you're looking to find solutions as opposed to laying down terms, if you will. So feel better about that. And where we have common interests, common concerns. And that, of course, is a sign of a broader and very a healthy relationship. Look, we have, JP, a lot more work to do. I'm not trying to suggest at any respect that we can have one meeting and everything's changed, but now we are engaged.